Softly, I'm the vice chair of this board. I'm chairing the meeting tonight in the absence of Chair Perry. This is a regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, Thursday, May 18th. Will the clerk please call the roll?
As you said, board member, or Chair Perry will not be here. Also, board member Smirkarova will be absent. With that, board member Callahan is absent. Grant Squirsh.
Here.
Hutchins.
Here.
Ingram.
Here.
Johannesson.
Here.
Softly.
Aye.
Wang.
Here.
We have 6 members present.
Okay, thank you. Have all the members reviewed the agenda? And does anyone have any adjustments to make to the agenda before we seek approval? Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Oh. Hearing none, the agenda is approved. We've got the minutes from last meeting, April 20th, 2023. Do I have a motion to accept those meeting minutes?
Second.
It's been a motion and a second. All in favor of approving prior meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, with that, the minutes are approved. Mr. Ellis, are there any petitions or communication, or Mr. Ellis isn't here right now. Oh, he's at the dais. Are there any petitions or communications from the last cycle?
Vice Chair Softly, we have one communication this evening. The appeal of the Uptown Theater windows, 2910 Hennepin Avenue, went to the Biz Committee earlier this week. The committee granted the appeal on the findings that the use as a large entertainment venue or theater presents a practical difficulty in terms of its use, and that light would intrude on events in the building in one area, and that if the window opened on the other, would just be looking into a stairwell. The other finding 2, the historic portion of the theater is unable to be modified and does exceed the maximum window coverage. So because the applicant had to leave that portion, it meant another portion of the building is all that could be modified in order to do it. And finding 3, that had already been met by staff in the presentation, so they adopted staff findings.
Okay, terrific, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that brings us to the business portion of our meeting tonight. This is a public hearing. We have 2 items on the agenda. We have item number 5 is 2111 Drew Avenue South. Item number 6 is 4901 17th Avenue South. Agenda item number 6 is scheduled for consent. Is there anyone who came down here to speak against agenda item number 6? Is there anyone on the board that would like to discuss agenda item number 6 or remove it from consent? Okay, and agenda item number 5 is scheduled for discussion. Before we move into the consent, voting on consent items, I just want to go over a quick reminder to everybody here in the room that the meeting today is a public hearing. If you do come up and speak, speak clearly into the microphone so that we can all hear you. Make sure your devices have been turned off or silenced so that they don't disturb the recording. If you are going to speak and testify, please record your name in the book on the table near the door, and then make sure to articulate your name and your address when you begin your presentation. The consent items are going to be approved without discussion from the board. We'll adhere to the staff recommendation that's listed in the staff report, including any conditions that are stated therein. And if you have any questions about an application after approval or denial, you can work with the staff member assigned to your project. With that, do I have a motion to approve the items on consent, number 6, 4901 17th Avenue South? Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item number 6 is approved. Good luck with your project. That brings us to our discussion item number 5 and staff presentation. Mr. Kohlhaas?
Thank you, Vice Chair Softly and members of the board. Before you today is a variance request to increase the maximum fence height for the property at 2111 Drew Avenue South. This property is in the R1 Multiple Family District, the Interior 1 Built Form Overlay District, and the Shoreland Overlay District. It's a little difficult to see with the color saturation, but on the screen you can see the front view of the property. It's an existing single-family dwelling. The yard at the front of the property is, it slopes up, and the flat of the yard is approximately 6 feet above the public sidewalk, and there is some flat yard space in front of the house at the top of that slope. On the left-hand side of the house, there is a public alley that runs along that side of the property. This is a site plan prepared by the applicant and some photos of the area in question, so you can see the house and garage on the property, and other improvements like a deck behind the house and various yard spaces around the property. The proposal is to install fencing around a lot of the property. The proposed fence would be 6 feet in height all the way around in all areas, though some of the other specifications for the fence would be changing in different parts of the property, so I'll go over those particular changes in a minute. I'll just note much of the proposed fencing for a lot of this property would be in compliance with applicable zoning code requirements for things like maximum fence height and opacity. It is only the portion of the fence that would be in the required front yard setback area that needs a variance in this case. So that'll be the focus of what we're looking at. The minimum required front yard setback is 20 feet from that front property line, and in that required front yard setback area, the maximum fence height is 3 feet for an opaque fence, or 4 feet for an open or decorative fence. So the proposal in this case, for the area in question, starting looking at the side yard of the property, which is at the bottom of the site plan, that is a 6-foot opaque fence that would more or less run along that side property line, and as it runs towards the front of the property and enters that front yard setback area, the fence would remain a 6-foot tall privacy fence in that area, in that portion of the front yard. Then as the fence turns and goes across the front yard and then turns again and goes back towards the house, it would remain 6 feet in height, but it would be changed to an open or decorative fence design. And so the applicant is requesting a variance to the maximum fence height requirements for those portions of the fence in the required front yard. The staff recommendation in this case is for denial, and I'll go over some of the staff findings in more detail. The first required finding regarding practical difficulties due to circumstances unique to the property, staff finds that this is not met. The subject property is 7,868 square feet in area, so it's a little bit on the larger end for a low-density residential property in Minneapolis, many of which are closer to around 5,000 square feet in area. The house and garage on the property appear typical in their size and location generally, and there are some existing yard spaces and other semi-private outdoor gathering spaces like the deck behind the house. There's significant portions of the property which can be enclosed by a 6-foot opaque fence without the need for a variance, and staff doesn't see anything unique about the property itself that creates a practical difficulty in complying with the fence height requirements, which are more strict in the required front yards. So staff finds that finding is not met. For the second finding regarding reasonable use of the property in spirit and intent of the ordinance, staff also finds that this is not met. The spirit and intent of the ordinance regarding maximum fence heights are generally to allow for privacy while maintaining access to light and air, to encourage an aesthetic environment, and to promote the public health, safety, and welfare. In required front yard setback areas, the fence height requirements are the most strict, as those are intended to be the most public-facing portions of properties. There's the least expectation of privacy in those areas, and intended to sort of create a more inviting landscape environment in a front yard that's near the public right-of-way. Fence height requirements and other zoning requirements for fences also relate to the principles of public safety through environmental design, which is a component of some of the comprehensive plan policies. related to fences and site design. A lot of the fence that's being proposed here would be an open and decorative design as it goes across the front yard, so it wouldn't necessarily be a visibility concern necessarily, but there is that portion of the fence along the side property line, which is still in the front setback, which would be opaque. It's at the top of that slope, which kind of enhances the screening effect of an opaque fence there. Again, the intent of the code is pretty plainly to require shorter fences in front yards, so staff finds that this finding would also not be met. The third required finding regarding essential character of the locality and potential for injury or detriment, staff finds that this is met in this case. There are also some additional findings specific to the Shoreland Overlay District, which this property is located in. Staff finds that those findings would all be met. I can go through those in more detail if the board is interested, but in the interest of time, I will conclude, again, by reiterating the staff recommendation is for denial based primarily on those two findings, which staff found would not be met. I would note if the board is inclined to grant this variance request, staff would recommend a condition of approval that the applicant prepare and submit an erosion control plan following best management practices. This is something we require for a lot of development proposals in the Shoreland Overlay District. There were a total of 3 public comments which were received. I believe they were all in support of the applicant's requested variance. Those should have all been made available to you. And the applicant is in attendance during this hearing. This concludes my presentation, but I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kohlhaas. Does anyone on the board have questions for staff? Okay, I see none. Thank you.
Thanks.
Would the applicant like to testify?
Good afternoon, Dane Stimart, the property owner, and Alex has been terrific and timely to work with, so just wanted to put that out there. I wouldn't have filed this if I didn't have neighborhood support, and I know some people sent them in. One of them actually is very in support of it because it also gives privacy to their backyard, which is a reverse corner lot. That's where the 6-foot privacy section would be. In the report, I don't know if it was my fault when I filed it, but there is a easement in my backyard as well. So it's not just that public alley, it's also the easement. So in actually the back, there's 10 properties and garages that kind of turn my backyard into a kind of a peninsula of a backyard. And then when you take out our garage and put in our gravel parking way and then add the slant of the hill, there really is no backyard. And then kind of in the design that was up before, the house is completely offset to the alley. So really the only flat spot is kind of that side, then going into the front. And so that's really where we're hoping just to maximize it. It would be really unfortunate to lose that 6 feet in the front. It also puts it very close to a Scotch pine, but I've put in about 8 cedar bushes that will completely cover this fence and everything in that path as well. So going from 4 to 6 feet in the front is really important just so that you can have animals and pets out there that are supervised 24/7 when they're out there. And so that's really why I'm looking for that extra bump. I did bring in just a few more angled picture views because I think it does make a difference. If we're able to add that camera one. And so this bottom image, it's not coming up super clear, but it's just showing you actually how far up that close house is. And so their house line is actually further up than where I'm even proposing to put this because it's a reverse corner lot. And then as you scroll down, you can kind of see like how close that house really is to the street, that upper right side. And so I just don't think like what I'm proposing is necessarily exacerbating or limiting the safety or viewpoint for neighbors. And without, calling out any other addresses, half a block down the street, there's a 6-foot privacy fence that goes feet from the street. I'm suggesting 14 feet from the street for me. As well as you can see on the right, there's multiple 10-foot garages that are feet from the street, and they have fences on top of their garage. So I'm just trying to show that, I guess, what I'm putting in is actually in spirit with what is in the neighborhood of obstructions in front of the street, and I actually think mine is significantly less from what's out there. So I'll just pause and see if there's any questions I can answer.
Are there any questions for the applicant at this moment? Mr. Johansson?
6-foot fence?
We do, and actually, I forgot to bring this up. I mean, when you add in a snowdrift, it's basically a foot left on the foot of the 4-foot fence. So our dog actually was crawling over the fence. Neighbors have the retractable leash, and they let their dogs actually come up to this fence, and dogs are protective, and so we are very concerned she could jump over. No kids of our own yet, but that will definitely be a bit of a concern. But our dog is capable of going over a 4-foot fence.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Johannesson. Are there any other questions from the board? Would you ensure that the clerk receives a copy of that document you just showed us?
Yep.
That way we can include it in the record?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other questions of staff before I close the public hearing? Mr. Hutchins.
Thanks, Vice Chair Softly. Where is the city at with the practical difficulty of that slope creating kind of a safety issue? The 4-foot fence is not necessarily adequate to prevent like a animal or a child like the applicant had said. Is there any consideration for practical difficulty there?
Vice Chair Softly, Board Member Hutchins, I can't think of any examples where that has been the case. I don't know if Mr. Ellis can think of any specific examples. In this case, beyond existing conditions, I mean, the slope is already there. This flat yard space is already there, so they could still have a shorter fence in that location. A 3-foot fence would be allowed here, a 3-foot opaque fence, or a 4-foot open decorative fence would be allowed in that area without a variance, without moving the actual location of that portion of the fence. So the height of the fence extending beyond what the zoning code allows, that wasn't a practical difficulty we were able to make. But
So essentially, if they backed the fence up to the 20-foot line, they could put a 6-foot safety, wouldn't be a issue anymore, and they just wouldn't maximize that extra few feet.
That's correct. And my understanding from the plans that have been submitted is right now that fence would be, I think, 14 feet from that front property line. So essentially, if they moved it back an additional 6 feet from where it's shown on the plans, then it could be a 6-foot tall privacy fence if they wanted.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Are there any other questions from the board? Okay, seeing no one, I don't see anyone in attendance, but I'll ask in case someone in the hall can hear me. If there's anyone else to speak, please come in the room now. Hearing and seeing no activity, I'll close the public hearing. Board discussion. Mr. Hutchins?
I think Mr. Johannesson beat me to the punch, to be honest, so
Okay,
let
Mr.
him go
Johannesson,
first.
You go right ahead.
I'll just let everyone know I'm in support of staff findings on this one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johannesson. Mr. Hutchins?
Thanks, Vice Chair. I would agree with Ms. Johannesson. I don't see a practical difficulty for moving the fence back 6 feet. Yeah, you always want the bigger flat yard, but I don't see how this one's any different than any other yard. They want more space inside of a fence. So I would move staff findings.
Okay. If there's no other comment from the board, I might take that as a motion from Mr. Hutchins. Is there a second?
May I make a comment?
Sure, yeah.
Microphone.
I just fundamentally appreciate the fact that, you did the opaque and then the transparent fence, and I thought that made a lot of sense. And seeing these new photos that were given to us showing existing garages are past the line and seeing the existing houses past the line, I'm struggling with this one. And I get it, the difference of a few feet, but I just want to commend you because I think you did a really good job, and I'm sorry that it might not go through.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Grants-Croce. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call the roll? Sorry, before you call the roll, is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Ms. Blanchard?
Board Member Grants-Korsch.
Nope.
Hutchins.
Yay.
Ingram.
Yay.
Johannesson,
Aye.
Wang,
Aye.
Softly.
Well, I abstain as the
Oh,
city chair.
right.
But with that, it appears the motion has passed. The board has approved staff's position and denied the variance. If you have any questions, you can speak with Mr. Kohlhaas about what your options are moving forward. Thank you for coming down today, and again, make sure that document is received by staff. Okay, well, that takes care of all the business items on our agenda. Are there any other announcements from the board? Okay, we have no announcements. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved in second, all in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, we are adjourned.
Your gateway to local government.